Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group and Corporate Direct.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Here it is. Hey, welcome to episode 163 of Get Rich Education, the show that at this point has created more passive income and financial freedom for busy people like you than nearly any other show in the world. I'm Keith Weinhold. Your financial forecast is going to be looking sunnier than ever after today. I'll tell you why. But you know what? Your open mind might very well find the content in today's show shocking. You know, some people have believed the same old antiquated thing for so long that they figure that the notion that has been believed for so long must be absolutely true only because it's been believed for such a long time. Yes, just because you believe something for a long time, that does not make it true. It's sort of like, I think Yoda said it, you must unlearn what you have learned. A lot of times you need to unlearn the old before you've made room for new ideas. Eliminating your debt can actually postpone your financial freedom. You need to form both the habits and the actions that produce income streams. Well, you can't very well do that if you put your money toward retiring debt instead. Focusing too much on becoming debt-free, that often means that your money is being sent away to retire. And that's why you can't retire. You can't retire or be financially free because instead you sent your money away to retire rather than work for you and rather than getting your money to have other people's money work for you. If you could invest in something that could never go up in value but could only go down in value, then how much of that investment would you want? Well, zero, right? Absolutely nothing. We are intelligent people that invest for the production of income, not speculate on a hope for capital gains. The investment vehicle that can never go up in value, but can only go down in value, that is called home equity, or even your rental property's equity. In fact, I have the ability to pay off my home's mortgage, but I refuse to do so. And a lot of the wealthiest people practice the same thing. I actually embrace mortgages. I do not fear them. Many Americans believe these following statements right here to be true, but in reality, they are myths and misconceptions. Okay, here we go. Your home equity is a prudent investment. That is actually false. Extra principal payments on your mortgage saves you money. False. Mortgage interest should be eliminated as soon as possible. That is also false. Substantial equity in your home enhances your net worth. That's what people think. That is false. Home equity has a rate of return. That is false. There is a reason why so many people fear mortgages and why you shouldn't. Okay, so in order to discover how our great-grandparents and our grandparents and even your parents and perhaps even you got this idea that a mortgage is a bad thing and a necessary evil at its best, we've got to go back in time to the Great Depression, and then we're going to bring it up to the present day here. In the 1920s, a common clause in loan agreements gave banks the right to demand full repayment of your mortgage at any time. Well, since this was like asking for the moon and the stars, no borrower really worried about it. Then, when the stock market crashed on October 29th, 1929, millions of investors lost huge sums of money, much of it on margin. Back then, you could buy $10 of stock for $1. Since the value of stocks dropped, few investors wanted to sell, so they had to go to the bank and take out cash to cover their margin call. Well, it didn't take long for the banks to run out of cash. So when banks ran out of cash, they started calling mortgage loans due from good Americans who were faithfully making their mortgage payments every month However, there wasn't any demand to buy these homes, so prices continued to drop. To cover the margin calls, brokers were forced to sell stocks, and once again, there wasn't a market for stocks, so the prices kept dropping. Ultimately, the Great Depression saw the stock market fall more than 75% from its 1929 highs. More than half of the nation's banks failed, and millions of homeowners, unable to raise the cash needed to pay off their loans, they lost their homes. Poof, gone. And out of this, the American mantra was born, and it said this: always own your home outright, never carry a mortgage. And the reasoning behind Americans' new mantra at the time was really quite simple. If the economy fell to pieces, at least you still had your home and the bank couldn't take it away from you. Maybe you couldn't put any food on the table or pay your bills, but at least your home was secure. Since the Great Depression, laws have been introduced that make it illegal for banks to call your loan due. The bank can no longer just call you up and say, hey, we're running a little short on cash and we need you to pay off your mortgage loan in the next 30 days. That just can't happen. Additionally, the Fed is now quick to infuse money into the system if there is a run on banks, as we saw in 1987, and we sort of saw that with quantitative easing later. Also, the FDIC was created to insure banks. Still, you can see how the fear of losing their home became instilled in the hearts and the minds of the American people back in the day, and they quickly grew to fear their mortgage. In the 1950s and 1960s, families would throw mortgage burning parties to celebrate paying off their home. And so, because of this fear of their mortgage, for about 90 years now, most people have overlooked the opportunities their mortgage provides to build financial security. So there's a reason why people hate their mortgage and why you shouldn't. Many people hate their mortgage because they know over the life of a 30-year loan, they will spend more in interest than the house cost them in the first place. To save money, it becomes very tempting to either make a bigger down payment or make extra monthly principal payments. Unfortunately, saving money this way is not the same as making money, or put another way, paying off debt is not the same as accumulating assets. By tackling the mortgage payoff first and the investing goal second, many people really fail to consider the important role a mortgage plays in your effort toward financial freedom. Every dollar we give the bank is a dollar we then did not invest. While paying off the mortgage does save us interest, it denies us the opportunity to earn greater interest with that money. Are you still doing something like this? Do you know anyone that does this? Hey, Mr. Banker, here is an extra $100 principal payment this month. Don't pay me any interest on it. If I need it back, I'll pay you fees, and I'll borrow it back on your terms. And plus, I'll try to prove to you that I qualify again. Some people, a lot of people do just that right there, okay? That is fear and scarcity and a lack of education rather than knowledge and abundance and mastery. Money you give the bank is money you'll never see again unless you refinance or sell that property. It doesn't matter whether that property is your primary residence or one of your income properties. So why then separate accumulated equity from your home? Okay, why would you want to have the equity removed from your home? There are actually three primary reasons. Number one is liquidity. Number two is safety. And then thirdly is rate of return. There are even more reasons than that, but let's just focus on these, okay? So basically we're asking, how liquid is it? Can I get my money back when I want it? And then secondly, really, how safe is it? Is it guaranteed or insured? And then thirdly, what rate of return can you expect? Home equity fails in all three of these tests of a prudent investment. So let's examine each of these core elements in more detail to better understand why home equity fails these three tests of a prudent investment, and more importantly, why homeowners benefit by separating the equity from their home. All right, so why separate equity to increase liquidity? Well, what is one of the biggest secrets out there in real estate? Really, it's that your mortgage is a loan against your income more so than a loan against the value of your house. Without an income, in a lot of cases, you just cannot get a loan. If you suddenly experience difficult financial times, would you rather have $50,000 of liquid cash to help you make your mortgage payment, or instead have an additional $50K of equity already trapped inside your home? Almost every person who has ever lost their home to foreclosure would have been better off if they had their equity separated from their home in a liquid, safe, conservative side fund that could be used to make mortgage payments during their time of need. The importance of liquidity, that really became clear when we have something like the stock market crash of October 1987 or March of 2000, or again in September of 2008. If someone had advised you to first sell your stocks and then convert to cash, that person would have been a real hero. Or if you had enough liquidity, then you could have just weathered the storm. Those with other liquid assets, they were able to remain invested. Okay, so they were rewarded as the stock market rebounded and recovered fully, sometimes pretty quickly. However, those people without liquidity, they were forced to sell when the market was down, causing them to accept significant losses. So it's better to have access to the equity or the value of your home and not need it than to need it and not be able to get at it. And of course, I don't advocate for people to have much exposure to stocks because that just isn't where the wealth is created. If you want to build wealth, keep your equity out of stocks and maintain small equity positions in a whole bunch of income-producing properties. To reduce the risk of foreclosure during unforeseen setbacks, keep your mortgage balance as high as possible. Is paying off your home really safe? Unfortunately, a lot of home buyers have this misconception that paying down their mortgage quickly is the best method of reducing the risk of foreclosure on their homes. However, in reality, the exact opposite of that is true. As homeowners pay down their mortgage, what they're doing is they're unknowingly transferring the risk from the bank onto their own back. When the mortgage balance is high, that's when the bank carries the most risk. When the mortgage balance is low, the homeowner bears the risk. With a low mortgage balance, the bank is in a great position as they stand to make a nice profit if you default. In addition to assuming all unnecessary risk, many people who scrape up every bit of extra money that they can to apply against principal often find themselves with no liquidity. When tough times come, they find themselves scrambling to make their mortgage payments. Just imagine this scenario. Okay, we're going to assume that now you are a mortgage banker. You're the mortgage banker. You're sitting in your plush leather chair in your corner office with a great view, and you turn away from your view out the window and you swivel in your mortgage banker leather chair, and you're looking at your loan portfolio as this mortgage banker that you are, and say you have 100 loans that are delinquent. All of the loans for the homes are valued at $600,000. Okay, so you've got all 100 of these 600K homes, and your borrower payments have become delinquent on every one of those. Well, some of the loan balances are $300K, and some are $500K, and suddenly, say there's a glut in the market, and the homes are now worth only $400K. All right, well, which homes do you, as the mortgage banker, foreclose on first? Well, it's going to be the ones owing the least amount of money, of course. After all, as a banker, you'd make money taking back those homes. However, you'd lose money trying to sell a home for $400K when you still would have been owed $500K on it if you just keep it in your portfolio. Banks have been known to call up delinquent homeowners on the phone, call them up if they have a high mortgage balance, and offer assistance to those people, okay? They're not going to try to foreclose on them. In that case, as a mortgage banker in your plush leather chair, you're going to get on the phone with your homeowner borrower and you're going to say, hey, you know what? We understand you are going through some really tough times. Is there anything we can do to help you? We really want you to be able to keep your home. That's what they're going to say. The last thing they want to do is take back a home that they will lose money reselling because that homeowner smartly kept their mortgage balance high and their equity low. So you, as an owner of your home and owner of income property, want to keep your mortgage balance high and your equity position low. If you fall ill or you become incapacitated in a car accident and you're not able to work, you want to be sure that your family is protected. Well, while you're in your hospital bed, or worse, you're just gone in a calamity, well, the bank is going to foreclose on those homes that have a low mortgage loan balance first. Those with a high mortgage loan balance, they're going to be the ones that get the workouts. More equity on your part is more risk. So that's why I wanted to put you in the position of the mortgage banker in your leather easy chair there. Look at it from their perspective. Don't vilify the banks with being ruthless with foreclosing on those with high equity positions, because if you were given two equally difficult tasks, well, then which task would you do first? If you had two wheelbarrows sitting in front of you and you had to push each wheelbarrow up a long hill, and one wheelbarrow was empty and the other wheelbarrow had 100 pounds of concrete in it that you had to grunt and struggle to push up the hill, but yet either task paid you the same, then which wheelbarrow are you going to push up the hill first? Well, it is the light, empty one. It's interesting to note, too, during the Great Depression, the Hilton chain of hotels was deeply affected by the stock market crash, and Hilton could not make their loan payments. You know what saved them from financial ruin? It's that they were so leveraged. In other words, they owed so much more on their property than what it was worth that the banks couldn't possibly bother to afford wasting their time foreclosing on it, because the Hiltons understood the value of keeping high mortgage balances, thereby keeping the risk on the backs of the banks. So closer to the present day here, hurricane-ravaged homeowners in Florida or New Orleans or Houston, gosh, just some real tragedies. Those people would have been better off if they had removed a large portion of their equity and put it into other cash-flowing properties spread around the country like I do. Or they would have been better off even keeping it in a safe and liquid side fund accessible in a time of need. Ask yourself, if you're a California resident and you own a $1 million home during an earthquake in California and you didn't have earthquake insurance like many don't, would you rather have your equity trapped in your home, or would you rather have more of it in income-producing properties in the Midwest and South? If it were trapped in the California home, your equity would be lost along with the house in the earthquake. What about litigation? In the event of a widespread natural disaster where an insurance company would be at risk if they had to make massive payouts to all these tons of homeowners, well, that insurance company often has an incentive to come up with reasons not to pay insurance claims or delay paying the claim. And they're probably going to delay paying a claim at a time when you and your family are displaced and you're staying at some modest hotel while your life is in a shambles. We saw this happen in national disasters recently. If your home is rendered uninhabitable in the event of a natural disaster, and then there's this dispute between you and the insurance company about, well, what was it that exactly ravaged your home? You know, was it the hurricane's wind, or was it the storm surge, or the wind that led to the storm surge, or the hurricane's rain that led to the flood? Or what can you make a claim for then? So, I mean, really, do you want to be in the scenario where you have to hire a lawyer yourself to fight the insurance company, and especially at a time where you or your family are vulnerable and uprooted while you're all staying at the Holiday Inn? Well, if you have a lot of skin in the game, a lot of equity, you're going to be the one most likely to have to research what legal counsel is going to be best for you, and then hire and then pay for and then retain legal counsel against the insurance company. If you don't have much skin in the game and you've left the bank with the greater equity position, then the bank is going to have the incentive to want to hire the attorney themselves. They will take on that fight against the insurer for you. So see, with every mortgage pay down that you make, you have increased the bank's security in this property risk, and you've decreased your own security, and you've decreased your own peace of mind. More equity is more risk. And see, you thought it was the opposite. Previously, you thought paying down a mortgage increased your feeling of security. Sometimes you can get insurance to prevent risk of loss in the event of a hurricane or an earthquake or a fire. But see, even then, even if they're on your side, there is no such thing as property equity insurance. No one sells property equity insurance. The homeowners with the least financial education are the ones most likely to get foreclosed upon. What if you got a lot of equity in a property and you're having a Cinco de Mayo party over at your place and a neighbor kid falls 20 feet off your deck? Well, now the neighbor kid's parents want to sue you. We live in a litigious society. When that neighbor's plaintiff attorney sees that you don't have much low-hanging fruit as equity to go after, that lawsuit might not even ever come your way in the first place. It might never be born. A low equity position is an effective asset protection strategy to make the bank share in the risk with you. Again, that right there, that's really another example of making other people's money work for you. Other people's money. The bank's money is helping to protect you. My home, our primary residence, has a market value right now of between $450,000 and $470,000. And my mortgage loan balance at this moment, it's almost exactly $400,000. So I've intentionally taken proactive measures to keep my mortgage balance high and my equity position low. That's about 15% equity in my home here, something like that. So I practice what I preach. Instead of having that equity in my home, I have it spread across low-cost, income-producing properties all over the country. This limits my risk, and it's also increased my liquidity. So instead, I can turn these equity dollars into those down payments on more income property, and that increases my overall rate of return substantially. You've got to think about separating equity to increase your rate of return. Actually, that brings me to something. I've got a little question for you here. How do you think the rate of return from home equity was in Boston for the last 3 years? What about Seattle for the last 1 year? What do you think the rate of return from home equity was? Yeah, you got to be careful. This is a trick question. The truth is, it doesn't matter where you live or how fast the homes are appreciating. The return from home equity is always the same. It is zero. We have a misconception that because our home appreciates or our mortgage balance is going down, that the equity itself has a rate of return, but that is simply not true. Home equity has no rate of return. Home values fluctuate due to market conditions, not due to a mortgage balance. Your home or your income property's value, that fluctuates on population growth, job growth, supply versus demand, and all kinds of other factors. But the equity in the home, that has zero relationship to the home's value, and it is in no way responsible for the home's appreciation. So therefore, home equity simply sits idle in the home. It does not earn any rate of return. And let's just assume that you have a home worth $100,000 and say you own that free and clear. If you have a $100,000 property with just $20,000 of equity in it, well, if that home appreciates 5%, either way, you still own an asset worth $105,000 at the end of the year. So now you've got a 25% return on your skin in the game because you're leveraged, not just a 5% return like you would where if it were completely paid off. In either case, it wasn't equity that provided the return, it was the market. So by limiting your exposure, you increase your rate of return. I actually cover this topic quite a bit in my first book, which was published earlier this year. Homeowners would be better off burying money in their own backyards than paying down their mortgages because money buried in your backyard is liquid, assuming that you can find it, and it's safe, assuming that no one else finds it. However, neither one of them is earning a rate of return. It's actually losing due to inflation. I'm going to come back with so much more. You're listening to Get Rich Education.
You've worked hard to acquire real estate. Don't lose it in a blue instant. We live in a litigious society. Assets must be protected. Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton founded Corporate Direct to provide strong and effective asset protection for all investors in America. Corporate Direct offers personalized attention to your specific situation and is very affordable. Call 800-600-1760 and mention Get Rich Education for a $100 discount on all formations. Garrett Sutton wrote Loopholes of Real Estate, Start Your Own Corporation, and Toxic Client, among other bestsellers. He and his experienced team at Corporate Direct want you to be protected right now and with proper corporate maintenance into the future. Visit corporatedirect.com today for a free incorporation kit or call 800-600-1760 for your Get Rich discount. That's corporatedirect.com at 800-600-1760.
Cash flow real estate investors, if you're looking for a mortgage loan with a company that specializes in investment property loans, it's Ridge Lending Group. They provide income property loans in almost every U.S. state. Ridge has worked with tens of thousands of investors and homeowners all over the country. In fact, with ethics and transparency, they've helped more people realize their dreams through real estate investing than any other mortgage lender in the country. Get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. And the reason I respect Keith, he's a very strong, smart, bright young man.
All right, suppose you were offered an investment that could never go up in value but might go down. How much of it would you want? Hopefully none. Yes, that investment is home equity. It has no rate of return, so it cannot go up in value. But it could go down in value if the real estate market declines or the homeowner experiences an uninsured loss, like a natural disaster sort of calamity, or your own body or mind's disability or foreclosure. That's why rather than paying down any mortgage, instead, once equity begins to accumulate, I use cash-out refinances and 1031 tax-deferred exchanges to invest that dollar in more cash-flowing property. The return from equity is always zero, so I want to reduce my equity exposure that I have in any one property. But borrowing equity out of a property, now see, that does incur an interest rate expense. But as long as I beat that interest rate expense incurred with the return from that reinvested dollar, well, now I'm dollars ahead. And if I can borrow at, say, a 5% interest rate, sheesh, I've talked a number of times here on the show on how investing into new cash-flowing turnkey income property with long-term fixed interest rate debt pays you 5 different ways simultaneously so that rates of return of 30% per annum are actually common. And you know what else? This increases your velocity of money too, rather than letting your equity slowly cut too deep in any one property. Accelerating loan paydowns would cut my leverage ratio. We discussed leverage ratio last week here on the Get Rich Education podcast. Let's talk about the cost of not borrowing. This is sort of the employment cost versus opportunity cost. When homeowners separate equity to reposition it into more income property or even a liquid safe side account, a mortgage payment is created on the portion that you've borrowed out. And that mortgage payment is considered the employment cost. What a lot of people don't understand is when we leave equity trapped in our home, we incur the same cost, but we call it a lost opportunity cost. The money that's parked in your home doing nothing could be put to work, earning you something. So create arbitrage for yourself. Learn to effectively, you're being your own banker. By using the principles that the banks and credit unions use, you can amass a fortune. A bank's greatest assets are its liabilities. You can substantially enhance your net worth by optimizing the assets that you already have. You already have them. So by being your own banker, you can make millions extra. It's really not necessary to have like some gigantic chunk of equity in your home to benefit from using your mortgage to create wealth. A lot of homeowners without a large equity balance have benefited by simply moving to a more strategic mortgage, which can allow you to pay less on your mortgage each month, thereby enabling you to save or invest more each month. Even if you don't have a high equity position, if you have a 15-year fixed amortizing loan, you can increase your monthly cash flow by switching it to a 30-year. And you know, I once made the same mistake. I once had a 15-year loan on my own home, and I changed it to a 30 once I understood all this. Say the 15-year loan monthly payment is $700 per month more than the 30-year fixed amortizing payment. Well, wouldn't I rather have that $700 each month, either in liquidity or just to help me accumulate the ability to put it into an income-producing investment? On an income property, if you have a 15-year loan rather than a 30-year loan, that property probably won't cash flow either. And it's not just 30s that I favor. I actually favor interest-only loans the most, but they can be pretty hard to find these days. Interest-onlys, they got a bad name 10 to 20 years ago because, some people took out interest-only loans because not paying principal, that was the only way they could afford a property that didn't even generate income. Well, I favor interest-onlys because rather than having my extra dollars go to principal, that goes right into my cash flow pocket instead. Sure, I could still afford it if it were a P&I payment, but I just choose strategically not to. With income property, both inflation and tenants make my mortgage principal balances erode without me even having to get actively involved with principal paydowns. And that's something that would only corrode my cash flow if I got involved with principal paydowns. All right, let's just look at another example. I think I gave an example similar to this in my new book. If you're in, say, the United States or Canada or wherever, and you own a $300,000 home, and just for ease of numbers, let's say your home appreciates 10% and goes up to $330K over some period of time, all right? 300 up to 330. Now, let me ask you, did it matter how much equity was in the home? No. Again, either appreciation or loss in value has nothing to do with your amount of skin in the game. It has nothing to do with that equity inside the walls of your home, and it has everything to do with what's happening outside the walls of your home, like demographic trends or the remaining availability of developable land in your geography, or a national tightening or easing of lending standards. Those are the things that affect market value. Now, what if the value of your $300,000 home instead dropped down to $200K in value? Well, then if you had $100,000 of property equity exposed, it's all gone. Every bit of it's wiped out. So although the home fell in value 33%, your equity fell in value 100%. It is just gone. And now you understand why property equity is unsafe. So number one, prevent equity from accumulating. And then number two, spread it around into other properties in different geographies. When you do that, you've planted a number of small equity seeds, and they all have substantial room for growth in a new property. So I think big picture. Rather than retiring mortgages, I'm actually acquiring mortgages and then integrating them into my financial plan. Rather than fighting to get rid of mortgages, I have embraced them. I've brought them onto my side. I've made them part of my team, and I don't want them to go away. I use it as a tool. You can think of your mortgage as a collaborator, not a competitor, okay? Life is a lot more harmonious and plentiful and peaceful when you turn your competitors into collaborators. It's the same way in the business world and everywhere else. So I don't just enjoy collecting properties. I actually enjoy collecting mortgages. The way I've lived for a long time is that I don't desire to have my home, or any income property for that matter, paid off by the time I'm age 40 or 60 or 120. When I pull equity from one property and use it as a down payment toward another property, I haven't actually lost any equity either, although I might just have a corner chipped off for some closing costs or some agent commissions. But rather than losing equity, I've just transferred equity. It's still my equity. Now consider that when I pull equity from my home and put it into an income property, I typically do incur a higher home mortgage payment than what I had previously. But as long as the difference between the new home mortgage payment amount and the old payment amount is exceeded by the positive cash flow that I receive from the new rental property, now I'm dollars ahead on a monthly basis. Plus, you're going to have all the other benefits of owning a real estate portfolio that's greater in value. So in this example, I now have two properties to potentially appreciate in value rather than one. So before, rather than you just having a $300,000 home, you might still have that $300,000 home plus a $200,000 income property. Now you've got $500K of total property, plus you've got greater tax benefits across more property, and you've got some monthly cash flow. As I go through life, I seem to find those with less financial education, they're the people that say something like, oh gosh, I can't wait until I have this property paid off. And I'm kind of confused. It's sort of like when someone tells me they have a boatload of money saved at the bank, all earning 1% interest or less. I'm thinking, okay, that's good. I see potential there. And now what are you going to do with it? Actually, money earning nothing at the bank is better than home equity because it's more liquid. So it's really understanding this stuff and then putting it into practice is how I, as an investor, got ahead farther, faster, and I just went over the top of a lot of do-it-yourselfers. Instead of learning about how to replace garage doors or how to clean a chimney in the most efficient way, instead learn about some big picture forces like arbitrage, leverage, cash flow, inflation, and smart equity management. It's going to get you ahead farther, faster. Outsource lower use tasks and replace them with higher use tasks, and you'll be living better than you ever thought you could. I think that some people get content with being their own landlord because they just don't know what else they could do if they would only think big picture. So some of those people instead, they will beat around in an old Ford F-150 pickup truck managing their own properties. They rationalize that their life isn't so bad compared to those without clean water in Ethiopia or Malawi. So they stay content trying to fix the furnace at the fourplex themselves. Maybe they're ordering a couple meatball subs on a lunch break that they're looking forward to and then spending the afternoon listening to sports radio while they're working on their property. I mean, hey, if you've explored enough of the world to know a different way of life and you still like the 20-year-old Ford F-150 life where you're managing your own property and you're storing canisters of touch-up paint where you've got all these lids labeled with a Sharpie marker for the different rental units that it goes with, and all this stuff takes up 10 or 20% of the space in your home's garage and all that stuff, well, then that's fine. But realize that as an investor, you've already got laborers standing by, and they are just waiting to work for you once you push that button. You've got laborers, and these laborers, they have names like tenants, leverage, arbitrage, inflation. You need to know that there is a better, higher use way to live. Outsource lower use tasks, replace them with these higher use tasks, and you'll be living better than you ever thought you could. Now, if someone would ask me if I would just want more property equity than I've currently got, like someone was just going to magically gift some equity to me, you know what? Yeah, I guess I'd take it. But see, the way I think of it is I think of it as the ability to disperse and distribute seeds, initiate that velocity, and spread it into more properties. Importantly, the thing is that you can't just understand this stuff or else it isn't going to help you. You've got to do it. You must act. Mere knowledge doesn't do you any good. I've conscientiously decided that I'm going to be abundant. I'm going to go out and control more. I made that decision a while ago. Now, there are a few limits here. You probably don't want to lock up everything. It's good to keep some liquidity on hand. I've talked about how it's a good idea to have 3 to 5% of your total real estate portfolio value in liquid funds as reserves. Consider that if you get underwater on your primary residence, it might make it hard for you to move if you have to move. But if you already live where you truly want to live, then why would you have to move? And why would you live anywhere other than where you want to live? You don't follow money. You've made money. Income streams follow you. So think about your control of a property too. You know, whether you have a 5% equity position in your property or a 60% equity position or a 100% position in your property, you still have the same right to tear down the fence at your home or paint your home or add a carport to a rental property that you own. Your equity position does not affect your control at all. Same control. Less property equity also increases your tax deductions because mortgage interest is typically tax deductible. So no one achieves financial freedom just merely by eliminating their debt. And this is a central tenet to the Get Rich Education paradigm: financially free beats debt free. Some people might just say, oh, well, eliminating the mortgage, that would just make me feel so good. Well, now consider what that good feeling is actually costing you. Once you're educated, debt-free doesn't feel so good. You're actually taking steps away from being financially free. Plus, if you eliminate a mortgage payment, consider that you still have a monthly housing payment. You're still going to have to pay property taxes, property insurance, pay maintenance, pay repairs, utilities, maybe HOA dues. So even complete elimination of a mortgage payment, that doesn't nearly eliminate your housing payment. So even though I have the ability to pay off my home, that would be one of the most reckless and financially uneducated things that I could possibly think of. I'd probably have to sell some income-producing property in order to make that payoff. Some people say they don't want to pull equity from their primary residence because they say that their existing mortgage is at such a low interest rate, 5% or 4% or lower. Well, oftentimes you can keep that first loan in place, not touch it, not reset its amortization schedule, not disturb that rock bottom interest rate. I kind of understand that. My primary residence has a 3.5% interest rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage. And what you can do then is add a home equity line of credit, second mortgage onto the property so that you can catalyze your velocity of money while you keep that first loan in place at the same time. Homes are meant to house you and your family. Homes are not meant to store cash. When money talks, do you listen or do you revert to thinking about what your dad thought or what your great uncle told you, or revert to that depression era of thinking? You know, most all of these principles that we're talking about here, these were even true when mortgage interest rates were 16 and 18% back in the early 1980s. You can take ever greater advantage of this financially free beats debt free plan now when mortgage interest rates are comparatively anemic. So you've got to go against the beliefs of traditional old-fashioned thinking. You know, maybe what you thought was black at one time is now white. What you thought was dark is light. If you act, your financial forecast looks substantially sunnier than what you might have thought. You won't be able to retire if you send your money away to retire locked up in a home's walls. You'll need to spend more of your life working. The greatest selling financial author of all time, Robert Kiyosaki, who has been on the show with us here a couple times, of course, he famously said that a house, your primary residence, is not an asset. A house is not a financial asset. It is a liability because it takes money out of your pocket every month. An asset puts money into your pocket every month. So keep your skin in the game, this liability, your home, to a minimum, and place that equity into assets, cash flowing turnkey real estate in the best markets. And see, that way your home is less of a rich dad liability to you when the equity is intelligently managed. But importantly, you've got to act. You can't just sit idle on this information. And boy, these right here, you know, these are the kind of discussions for you that shape you and shape your family's life and that open up time for yourself and passive income for yourself. These are the type of thoughts and ideas that got your kid the new hockey pads so that he could play on the hockey team, and you also had time to go watch her or watch him. These are the types of ideas that got you to Kauai when you and your family hiked that trail on the North Shore, rather than deferring every vacation until some fictitious someday out there. You've got to act. You know the old Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Well, which one sounds better, teaching a man to fish or giving a man or woman a fish? Well, it is doing both. That is the abundance mentality. So at Get Rich Education, we teach a man to fish. We also give a man a fish in a few different ways. Ridge Lending Group specializes in investment property loans and they've helped more people realize their dreams of financial freedom through real estate than any other mortgage lender in the country. So Ridge Lending Group is in the show notes for you. Well, then where do you actually find the income properties in investor advantage markets with in-place property management so that you can intelligently reposition your home equity if you choose to? Well, we both teach a man to fish here at Get Rich Education, and we give a man a fish at greturnkey.com, where there are more than 10 markets that I have hand-selected myself. This is a lineup of income property markets and providers, many of whom I've invested in myself, where you can download a report on a few investor advantage metros, read it at your leisure, and then that report also has the provider information so that you can follow up with them should you so choose and get an actual property. Often it's those markets in the Midwest and South. GRE Turnkey is in the show notes as well, so it has just never been easier. Thank you for being here, but again, you aren't here for me, you are here for you. I will be back next week to help you build your wealth. Remember, home equity is a terrible investment, and financially free beats debt-free. Don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.